Well, let's say good morning to James Harrison. James Tehenya, welcome to Moghrey Jedoonee.
Moramai.
Moramai to you as well. We'll talk more as the morning has gone on about your programme, about how you got into Manx, what you've been doing in Manx as we're going along. But how's the Friday night programme going, of course, on the AM?
Oh, it's going well.
Yeah.
It's a pretty wild sort of programme.
Yeah.
Normally have a few guests, an interesting selection of music.
Yeah, and it's one of them programmes where you've got some quite experienced Manx speakers there.
It is, yeah.
And some that have maybe just coming up the ranks, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the whole programme is through Manx,
Yeah.
so we don't really use any English at all. So I think that's the only programme that's done completely through Manx. So it's a good thing to have, yeah.
Yeah, tricky though.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, I mean, it's tricky to keep Rick on all of the guests as well.
Really?
Yeah. Well, you'll know about that.
We can indeed. All right, we're going to talk all through the morning with James, through till 12 o'clock today. We've got this to take. First is 27 minutes past 10 o'clock. James Harrison is with me this morning here on Moghrey Jedoonee. And James, are you from a long line of Manx speakers in your family?
Nah, not
No?
at all. Not
No?
at all. My parents are that generation. They'd have said, why bother learning that? Waste of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people like that, especially my parents' generation.
Yeah.
And I don't know what got me interested to begin with. And I suppose there must have been Manx speakers in the family at some point.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I never knew them. There must have been several generations back.
Yeah, because I suppose my parents were the same.
Yeah.
Probably yours.
Yeah.
They had the good old Manx twang with it, but
Yeah.
they never, and the odd words like "geel" and all that.
That's right, yeah.
But they never spoke Manx.
No, there are certainly plenty of dialect words in the English that we spoke.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would have recognised those as Manx until I started to learn Manx. I wouldn't have thought too much about where they came from. And a lot of people who start to learn Manx find this. They realise a lot of the words they've been using all their life are Manx Gaelic words.
Yeah.
Words like, Jill and Rick.
Yeah.
And
Keep Rick on it.
Yeah, all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, there are some good ones, but I mean, who did you seek help from when you first started? Did you sort of go online, or was there books or anything?
There wasn't a lot online at that time, and that wasn't even that long ago. Maybe 7-8 years ago now.
It was when you started.
It was when I started. I'd
Yeah.
say there's a lot more available now. There's loads you can turn to now. But when I started, there wasn't quite so much, and I struggled along on my own for a while. But you never get too far learning a language on your own.
I suppose that's one of the worries when you learn a few words and you think, yeah, because you read how to pronounce the letters and stuff. And sometimes you can be learning to say it wrong for 6 months.
That's
and it'd be
right,
hard
yeah.
to get out of the habit of
It would,
it then.
yeah, it would, yeah. And it's easy enough, I'd say, to learn to read a language on your own without worrying about how it's pronounced or how to have a conversation. Mm-hmm. But if you really want to speak a language, you need other speakers. You need somebody to talk with.
Yeah.
So my Manx didn't come along at all until I met a bunch of people who were using Manx together all the time. And some of these people had never spoken to each other in English.
Really?
Yeah. So I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah. I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to learn this language. I can, go to the pub once a week, listen to these people speak and see what I can pick up. And it was a really interesting experience. And so some of these people I still haven't spoken to in English. I've got quite a few friends. I've never spoken to them in English at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Fascinating that. We'll talk more very shortly, James. That's nice, isn't it? McTulloch Vannin, and that's from an album called Twisted Roots, and that's The Homecomers. And is there enough Manx music around, James?
Yeah, I think there is.
Yeah.
I think the scene's doing really well at the minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got some really good bands around at the moment. And on our show, we don't play exclusively Manx music.
No.
We started off that way. We used to play mostly like folk and Celtic music. Now we play absolutely anything.
Right.
Anything we can get our hands on.
Madonna.
Yeah.
Really?
If you want, Simon, if that's what you're into, we'll play a bit of that.
No, thank you very much indeed. But it's how is it you've managed to become a fluent Manx speaker in such a short time, really, James, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's just with meeting these other people.
Well, only once a week, you were saying to start with.
Yeah. Well, it took me about a year before I said anything, I have to say. I think for the first year I sat and listened, right, in the pub every week.
Yeah.
I was afraid of making a mess of it, so I didn't say a single word probably for a good year until I was confident enough to be able to speak.
Yeah.
So I think it was really meeting up with people, using the language, eventually listening, that got me where I got quite so quickly. And so I'd encourage anyone who's trying to learn on their own from a book to go and meet some people, to come to a class, even a conversational class, and just sit and listen. Even if you feel you don't have enough Manx to join in with the conversation, you'll benefit an awful lot just from sitting and listening to other people.
So it's just very, very beneficial, even though you think you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And they say in natural language acquisition, the way people learn languages naturally, if they're just kind of thrown into it, is they spend this time, a few months, listening before they are able to really say a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. What about the writing side of it? Is that a completely different kettle of fish?
Well, people are starting to publish books now. We've had a few recently. Well, I say recently, they've been a while now since we've had a new original fiction in Manx. If there's any writers out there who'd like to have a bash, I think it'd be welcome at this point. Yeah.
Right. What about singing?
Not me, you know.
Okay, fair enough. All right, well, it's fascinating, this story this morning, and keep the calls and texts coming in tomorrow, Judy. We always like to have your views on everything, if at all possible. And also, between now and 12 o'clock, we're talking about if you could, regardless of planning, we're going to ignore that today, where would you have your little house, and where would you look over and park it and think where you'd like to spend your time here on the Isle of Man. Bradda Head, oh, that's just gone out of my sight. Bradda Head is the one that's here. So the views over both the ports and out to the Calf as well. So thank you very much indeed for the text on that. So there's one for Bradda Head, and I must get up to that tower one day. I was just talking to Adrian Kane about it last week on the programme. Never been there.
Never been there.
No, not
Shocking.
to that Milner's Tower,
Milner's
is it?
Tower,
I've not been up there yet. Yeah, we were just talking about that on the last couple of weeks when we've been saying, you know, if you live here all your life, you know, tread allure, you think,
that's right.
Well, where should I have been?
Yeah.
You know, and it's amazing to hear, you know, because I go to the chasms quite a lot. I love it down there. And, you know, people say, oh, how do you get to the chasms? Where are they? And all that. So it's always interesting to know that. Where to live also, I'd like to live on the little road right at the bottom alongside the beach in Port Erin, heading for the lighthouse and cafe. There's even Davidson's ice cream there nearby as well. Well, yeah. There are some special ones. Keep them coming in. 66 13 68 is the phone line in. 166 177 is the text. Or you can email studio@manxradio.com. Robert's been on. Good morning to you, Robert. He says he'd like to live on the road to the Slough from Ballacalawi there. There's an old building there with no roof left on it now. Not the Centrinians building. We're talking the Centrinians one on the cross. Not that one at all. No, it's the one. Is it scarred or scared? How do you say that one?
I don't know, man. Some people say scared, don't they?
I like to say scarred because it reminds me of the Lion King.
If you like, Simon.
Yeah. But it's what that road, you know, is coming down towards the Slough from the big picnic area. I think it's the one of the places on the right hand side there. And Robert was saying that's where he would live, and he's got the views across everywhere, and the sun comes up from the east, and right across all day it's got the sun. So I suppose it's got its advantages, hasn't it? Yeah. Cost you a fortune on sun cream though here on the island, wouldn't it? But I mean, how has your group expanded, or any more groups that set up that meet like you once did to learn Manx or speak Manx?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we try to do, because I teach Manx now for Culture Vannin.
Right.
And I do about 4 lessons a week. we tried to set up conversational groups so that people who are attending classes can then come to a conversation class and make some use of what they've learned, because that really is, as we were saying, the best way to learn the language is to start to speak it. And so, yeah, plenty of conversation classes going, and if anyone's interested in starting a class, or who maybe somebody who has some Manx already and would like to practice, wants to come to a conversation class, the best thing to do really is to contact Culture Van and go to their website. I think it's culturevanning.im. I'd have to check on that.
We'll check it on in a minute.
We'll check on that.
Yeah. It is fantastic website, though, isn't it? It really is a good start and an introduction to where you went from there, James.
Yeah, there's all kinds of materials and things on there now that you can make use of, whether you're a beginner or for more advanced learners as well. There's all kinds of stuff on there now.
Yeah, and you can get in touch with us because there's a Moghrey Jedoonee website, email address as well. MJ, Mike Juliet, at manxradio.com would get you through as well. We can use, while we're on air, studio at manxradio.com. But what was did it get easy to learn more words once you know a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Once you've got a kind of framework, once you know how a sentence is put together, then you can swap the words in and out.
Right.
So the most important thing really to learn is the structure of the language. If you know a few sentences, then the words can often be interchanged, can't they? You can swap one word in out for another to make a different kind of sentence.
Right.
So we try to focus on that too when we're teaching people. The idea that once you have a basic sentence form of a certain kind, you can change it any way you want using any new words you've learned to make something new and say whatever you want to say.
Yeah. Smiley and Tay.
Smile em Tay. Smile em Tay, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I like tea, isn't it? Yeah,
that's it.
But again, it's a good basic one, isn't it? Or, can we, I suppose.
It's a useful one, yeah. Cup of tea is always a good one to know.
Yeah.
We should tend to start out with that kind of thing.
A cup of tea. Yeah. Fantastic. All right, James. Great to have James Harrison with me today on Moghrey Jedoonee, and he's going to stay with us through till 12 o'clock. Let me tell you about Sunday Opinion, and that's on after the 12 midday news today on this week's programme. Ahead of this year's Tourism Industry Day, Roger will be taking a closer look at the island's visitor economy and the future direction of the tourist sector with studio guest Minister for the Department of Enterprise, Lawrence Skelly, MHK, and Head of Tourism, Angela Byrne. That's all on Sunday Opinion. Coming up to 9 minutes past 11 o'clock. It's Moghrey Jedoonee. It means Sunday morning in Manx. Simon Clarke here with his guest this morning, our very own James Jedoonee. James Harrison is with us, and we're talking all things to do with the island, particularly the learning of Manx that you've managed to progress so well in such a short time for such a young lad, James, as well.
Oh, thank you very much.
But I mean, what sort of feedback do you get from people, or from the programme as well? I mean, it's the people of different scales of knowledge of Manx that tell you?
Well, you've got to have a fair bit to listen, I'd say, because the whole thing's through Manx completely, right?
Yeah.
It's not scripted either, so when we started out, we used to script the whole thing, and then we put the script online, but it ended up being far too much work. So now we just sit and talk about whatever, have a few competitions or whatever. So you'd need a fair bit of Manx to listen, but like I was saying, if you've got a bit of Manx and you want to progress, one of the best things to do is just to listen to people speak. So I think we get a few people listening who maybe don't understand everything, but want to improve and try to pick up as much as they can.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was interesting when we were talking last week, when we were talking about Dúlish, for Douglas.
Yeah.
And somebody said, well, why does it say Hoolish or whatever on the sign in? And it was the complicated thing with that. But of course, if you heard either, I think if you had any nounce about you, I think you'd know we were talking about Douglas, wouldn't
You'd hope so, wouldn't you?
well, yeah, we'll say no more about that. But I mean, as well, you're doing a new dictionary, James, aren't you? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, it must have come out getting on for a couple of years ago now.
Right. Okay.
It's the newest. We've not had a dictionary published, I think, since Farragut came out in 1979.
Right.
That was the big blue dictionary that you can still find in shops.
Oh, I think I've got a copy of that.
Yeah. Farragut's dictionary he wanted to bring Manx into the modern world, so we wanted a Manx word for every new thing that you could imagine. That was the point of Farragut's dictionary back in 79. The dictionary we've just published is designed for learners. It's a lot small. It's a little pocket dictionary.
Right.
It's called Manx Words. And the idea came from a group of students in a university in Wales. I forget which one now. They were looking into which are the most useful and the most commonly used words for Welsh learners.
Right.
And we used their research to... they published their own dictionary, first of all, which is called Welsh Words. We basically stole their idea.
And called it Manx Words.
They called it Manx Words.
Yeah, well, I can't see any connection there.
And the idea is that every entry, so whatever word you have, has a sentence to illustrate how to use it. Anyone who's ever tried to use a dictionary in another language probably knows the pitfalls of using dictionaries. You can go astray quite quickly. You might have found a word in the dictionary, but it doesn't tell you necessarily how to use that in a sentence. So this is the idea behind Manx Words. Every entry has a simple sentence that illustrates how to use this word. So it's ideal for learners, people who've got a bit of Manx but want to improve.
Yeah, and I suppose the bit to start with is learning how to pronounce the letters, really, and the AUs or the EYs at the end.
Pronunciation the dictionary can't help you with.
No.
Obviously. We would have liked to include that, but there just wouldn't have been enough room or time for that. And in any case, then you'd have to learn a kind of a new language in order to tell you how to pronounce the words that tell you how it's pronounced, if you know what I mean. You can't really approximate the pronunciation of another language very well through normal English, because there are sounds that other languages have that English don't. So you can't write other languages very well using English sounds. You can only approximate it. If you want good pronunciation guidance, the best thing you can do is to go and listen to people speak.
Yeah. That's the way to do it.
Yep.
Right, we're going to talk more very shortly, James, but it's time to play our Sunday Smoothie. 18 minutes past 11 o'clock it is. And, James, we're talking about the dictionary that redone. And is the Manx got some silly things like the English with the O, E, A, E?
In terms of spelling, I mean, English is obviously a nightmare. I mean, if you had to learn it, you pity these poor people who have to learn English as a second language. Manx Manx spelling mostly based on English, so it's not much better. Must be said. We were just saying how other languages quite often have a very regular and predictable spelling system.
That's right. I say it on this program because my wife's originally from the Czech Republic, and when I can read it now quite good because I know an O, what we call an O, it's always pronounced O.
Yeah.
Or an E is always pronounced E.
Yeah,
that's
right.
And always.
So. And a lot of languages are nice and regular in that way. They've got a well-designed and rational spelling system. English and Manx really aren't like that. You just got to get on with it and do your best and learn it. Luckily, Manx is based on English, so you don't have to learn a whole new set of rules. Most of the things that you can apply to English spelling, they work in Manx as well. If you can read English, you can usually read Manx. Have a good guess at what Manx sentence would sound like just by reading it.
Yeah.
Unlike Irish and Scottish Gaelic, of course, who have their own spelling system, completely different to English.
Really?
It's much more rational, makes a lot more sense. But you have to learn the rules first of all as an English speaker. Mm-hmm. Once you do, it's perfectly rational. It's a good spelling system. But to an English speaker, it looks horrendous. And if you tried to read it using English rules, you'd make a horrible mess of things. Yeah. Manx being based on English, it's easier to start off with. A few things you need to know.
Yeah.
Well, there's the EY on the end of word that trips everyone up, doesn't it?
Well, not if you reasonably Manx, though, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, you take
Kill you.
killer,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but it throws everyone off. You take a word like mordder for dog, spelled Moddey, and the EY trips everyone up, doesn't it? People say moddy.
The Maudie do.
Yeah, but an EY on the end of a word in Manx is an
Yeah.
So mordder, the mordder do,
The Maudie do.
not the moddy do. Yeah.
Well, the CH is another, and the GH, is it, at the end can be...
Yeah, well, you need you're going to have to learn a whole new set of sounds. Any language you learn, you're going to need a brand new bunch of sounds to speak that language, right? And Manx is no different. It has its got its own collection of sounds you need to know.
Yeah.
So you've got your CH, which is a ch,
Yeah.
ch, or a GH can also be a ch, but you've also got a r, as well as 2 types of L and 2 types of N.
Right.
Which is a bit strange, right? You've got your L and L.
All right.
Right, so now to an English speaker, they probably don't sound very much different, do they?
Right.
A L and a L, but they're quite different in Manx, and it can make a difference to the meaning of a word.
All right. Well, we'll go into that in more detail very shortly. We're going to do the What Song Guide first, though, 21 past 11. There we go. That's a nice Manx track for you. Ruth Kegan and her version of Finn as Ocean here on Manx Radio. It is 25 minutes to 12 o'clock. Sunday opinion after the 12 midday news today. On this week's programme, ahead of this year's Tourism Industry Day, Roger will be taking a closer look at the island's visitor economy and the future direction of the tourist sector with his with the tourist sector with studio guests, Minister for the Department of Enterprise Lawrence Skelly MHK and Head of Tourism Angela Byrne. So there we go. That's all on Sunday Opinion with Roger Watterson just after the 12 midday news today. And then Roger presents the Man Line from round about 1:15 through until 2 o'clock today. Well, James, obviously, James Denyer, James on Friday, I think it means, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I only got the gig. Another James was doing it, first of all.
James O'Meara.
James O'Meara used to do it, yeah.
Played badminton against James a couple of times.
Yeah. They've got the Albert and Port St Mary, haven't they? The O'Mearas.
Oh, right, I'm not sure.
Anyway, so he was doing it for a couple of years, and then he went away. They needed somebody else to do it.
Right.
And having the same name, I got the gig.
Yeah, mighty. We'll talk about how do you get away to any of the Celtic things very much, James, or do you get much feedback on your programme? Obviously, it's on Friday evenings, 5 o'clock.
That's right, yeah.
Do you get many people from off island compete? Getting in touch with you?
We have one regular listener in Ohio. I think it's in Cincinnati. Katie Kermode, she's called, and she's learned Manx in probably the most difficult way, almost completely on her own, and she's learned almost completely on her own in America from books mostly, and I think she's done a fantastic job learning in that way. We're often in touch on Twitter throughout the program. We do a little competition most weeks, and people can take part on Twitter in the competition, whatever it is.
Does she have the Manx with an American twang in it?
Her pronunciation's very good.
Yeah?
Yeah, she's a very good speaker. Yeah, it's amazing how well she's done.
Yeah, and it's interesting that people in different parts of the world that are interested in learning Manx. Is it the attraction that it's sort of quite a minority one,
Possibly. I mean, there are people who are just interested in languages, and especially small, quirky languages like Manx is. And there's quite a big Manx diaspora, A lot of people emigrated, and Ohio was one of the destinations a lot of Manx people went to in the 19th century. And Katie's ancestors were those people who went to Ohio. Kermode's her surname. So she's of Manx extraction, and I think for a lot of people, they're looking for some kind of connection with their ancestry or their place of origin. So some people learn for that reason, I think.
Right, okay. Well, James, getting prepared obviously for next Friday's programme, and did you get involved much in the Manx fairy tale side of it and things like that, or is it just a passion of yours that was to learn the Manx language?
Yeah, I'm not terribly interested. Well, I mean, the whole culture and music, fairy tales, folklore, all of that, it's all quite interesting stuff. And a lot of the recorded folklore preserves a lot of quite interesting Manx. So if you're interested in Manx, quite often people are also interested in the recorded stories and things that go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a particular interest of mine, but it is very interesting stuff.
Yeah. Do you ever listen to the old recordings of people talking, Doug Farragher and all?
I do, yeah. That's one of the ways I got started out on my own. There used to be, you can still buy this Skeelan Vannin, and that's the collected recordings that the Irish Folklore Commission made in 1940, whatever it was, 7, I think,
right.
when they visited the Isle of Man. You'll know the story of this. You'll have spoken about this with Brian Eamon. De Valera came to the Isle of Man unaware that Manx existed.
Really?
At the time. Yeah. And, well, I believe they were forced to put in at Port Erin in a storm, and they were heading back to Ireland, I think. So they put in here, and they went for a stroll about, and met some Manx speakers. And De Valera, who'd set up this Irish Folklore Commission to record Irish language and folklore, said, well, we have to get a recording van over here to record this language before these speakers, who are the last generation of native speakers, are all gone.
Yeah.
So they sent this van over, and they got about 5 hours of recordings in the end, and this is what's available now under the name of Skeelan Vannin. Absolutely fascinating recordings, real treasure trove there.
Yeah, are they just in Manx, them recordings?
Most of them are, but there's also quite a lot of Manx dialect recordings too.
Right.
Yeah, some of them are very interesting as well. The bulk of it's Manx language, but yeah, quite a lot of Manx dialect as well.
Yeah, well, I know a bit about that. Obviously, you've been with the Michael Players.
Yeah.
We're performing on Saturday night at the Peel Centenary Centre.
Is that right? What are you performing?
A little smook.
A little smook?
Yeah, but there won't be any smook because
No.
of fire regulations and stuff. But yeah, and it's a great thing because, you know, I am Manx, and like we spoke at the start of the programme, James, you know, there was nothing there for us when we were kids.
Yeah.
And, you know, you never really heard anyone. The only Manx I heard was Doug Farragher and Louise Quirk doing the close down on Manx Radio, you know, which I play occasionally. And, you know, and a tea towel we had.
Yeah.
An old tea towel that had pictures of, you know, the Tive egg and, you know, the muckler.
Yeah.
The pigsty. It
That's
just
right,
had little things in Manx which sort of stuck in my mind, but nobody ever really spoke it up Derby way and stuff. So it's just interesting to listen to it still today.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, as you say, how quickly the attitude shifted against the language. Some of the last native speakers were from the Derby and Ballaugh area.
Mm.
But then a couple of generations later, and you find people denying that language even existed in the first place, don't you?
Yeah.
You hear people saying things like this. But things are shifting now, and I think the generation of people, of Manx people, and it was often, you find people who are most vociferously against Manx are in the Manx's families, because it was in those families that it was really, the message was really hammered in, you know, this language that we used to speak is no use now. There's a lot of shame, I think, as well, attached to having lost a language, such a big part of what would have been their own identity at one time, having been completely lost. But things are changing now, and people are starting to take it up again, obviously.
And that's one thing you've got to be proud of the Welsh for, haven't you? The part in England, you know, in that same island, so to speak, yet they have managed to keep their language alive at a great high level, haven't they?
It's quite amazing, yeah. And the Welsh are quite militant about their language, and I think they've got that going for them. You know, they do. They will put up a fight when it comes to their language and culture. Some of them we're a bit apathetic, I think, on the Isle of Man sometimes, aren't we?
Yes.
It's a bit tre de lure.
Well, yeah, if you want to learn a bit of it, doesn't really matter. Yeah. And you do get mixed reactions when you talk about it. You speak to some people and say, oh, yeah, we've got to try and keep the language going, And it has grown, it's since probably the 80s or whenever the 90s when the Bun School started going, when they were teaching the primary schools a bit of basic Manx. And I think that was, the sort of start of the uprising again.
Yeah,
there's a lot of the kids, they can speak the national anthem and stuff like that in Manx now, can't they?
Yeah, well, the school, obviously, the Bone School has been a great success story now, and a lot of kids are coming out of there with great Manx, as well as the Manx peripatetic team, who now manage to teach years 4, 5 and 6 in every primary school on the island. Manx classes are available.
Yeah.
So every primary school student on the island is getting at least a little bit of Manx and some awareness of the Manx language. I think without this, a lot of young people wouldn't even be aware that there is a Manx language. So I think that's very important work as well.
All right, lovely. We'll speak again in a second or two, James. 5 to 12 it is. I'm Moghrey Jedoonee with James Harrison and myself, Simon Clarke. And James, back on Friday evening.
That's right, 5 o'clock on AM or online, of course, after the 5 o'clock news every Friday.
Yeah, and all in Manx, isn't it?
Yeah, completely in Manx, yeah. But if you're learning, have a listen, and it's a good way to improve your Manx by listening. And
you can get in contact with the programme as well if you feel as though you want to ask a question.
Yeah, you can. We're on Twitter. We out on Twitter every week at James Jedoonee.
Yeah. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you today, James, and I'm hoping that you're going to come back to Moghrey Jedoonee another Sunday and we'll talk about something else.
Aye.
Good mighty. All right.